Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. My name is Danielle Horace, and I am so excited to welcome you back to our More Than School Fireside Chat, powered by Rise. We call this series More Than School because a public education in Idaho really is so much more. It's more than classrooms, it's much more than curriculum, it's more than standardized tests. Our public schools prepare children to succeed far beyond the classroom. And even more importantly, our public schools provide equal opportunity for all Idaho children to thrive and reach their individual potential. So, folks, the role of being an educator is hard. It's hard during a normal year. And this has been, well, not a normal year. We're going to talk more today about how even the last week has been particularly tough in the education world. The expectations are high, the stakes are higher, the resources are low, but there's one thing we know for sure. Educators are resourceful. They're nimble, they're smart, they're creative, and they bridge the gaps in our system to help kids succeed. This happens through the work of passionate educators like the ones you'll get to meet today. They go above and beyond to make sure that kids have what they need, especially during challenging times. Idaho Public Schools provide so much more than school. They shape the future. So I get the chance right now to introduce you to my colleague, Dr. Don Coberly. He joins this group of passionate educators with 38 years in the education world, and most recently as the superintendent of Boise Public Schools. He is now the current co-CEO of Rise, Treasure Valley Education Partnership. So Don, welcome, and thanks for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. This is our fourth session of the Fireside Chats, and the second one with these two superintendents from Mountain Home. We have James Gilbert, and from Caldwell, Dr. Shalene French. And I'll just, a little caveat here, Shalene could not get her StreamYard, or the thing that we're using to broadcast, to work. And so she's on the phone, so you'll hear her, but James is obviously, you'll see the video of him as well. So as I said, this is our second meeting with these two folks, and a lot has transpired since we met last. The legislature has been hard at work, and we want to take some time to address a few of the things that have come up since our last visit. So just to refresh our viewers' memories, what is your status in your districts with regard to hybrid and in-person learning, and why are the opening plans, reopening plans, et cetera, status plans different from district to district and not the same statewide? Let's start with you, James.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, in Mountain Home, we've been back to full-time in-person since March 8th. Prior to that, we were in a hybrid model. And I think, and we're 5 days a week, I should also add. And I think the answer to that question is every district is a reflection of their community and the community norms that are there. And that's the beauty of Idaho school districts, is that we have locally elected school boards that make those decisions based on the community. And so I think why there was a difference was there was a difference in each community with where the pandemic was, as far as case numbers and transmission, and obviously with some comfort level too, on what those opening plans look like. So I don't think in a state as big as Idaho that covers such a large geographical area that it would make sense to try to do this one size fits all, because there's so many differences from north to south and east to west.
Right. I understand that. Shalene, where are you guys?
So thanks, Don. So we returned to in-person learning March 19th, right after spring break.
Okay.
We're 4 days a week.
Okay.
And I'm just listening to James, and I'm like, that is it's correct. It's a local control, and every community was different. And in Canyon County was a hot spot for a while in the state. And I live, or our district is in a and a place where we don't live isolated from the people in Nampa or in Middleton, or in Boise. The Treasure Valley is a commuter type of a area, and so we were super cautious. And one thing I would say about our school board, who, yes, again, locally elected by the patrons of Caldwell, we recognize that we have multi-generational families. Our school district is made up of students who may live with their grandparents or live with other family members.
Right.
And so we're cognizant of that and just recognize that we had to do what was best for the families of Caldwell. I felt our board did a great job in seeking the health professionals' input. They did not use social media to make their decisions. They sought valid, reliable research and sought those people who could give good information and not be politically motivated when they made those decisions.
Right. So your school boards in Mountain Home and Caldwell are elected, and they're elected in just the Mountain Home and Caldwell areas, right? I mean, there aren't people from outside of those areas voting on your status. It's your school board representing your community. Is that right, James?
Yeah, that's correct. It's, you look at Elmore County, there's 3 different school districts with 3 different school boards. You have Glens Ferry, Prairie, and then the Mountain Home School District. And our 5 trustees are elected from those zones within the Mountain Home School District.
Okay. So it's locally elected officials making decisions about your district, and one of the reasons is that Mountain Home and Caldwell and Boise and Nampa are very different. All right. All right. So having established that, let's talk a little bit about local control, because that was Governor Little's byword at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was part of the reason why there weren't many statewide mandates. He said it over and over. I'm not going to do that. We want local communities to make their decisions. But that seems to have changed during the legislative session. Can you speak to what you see happening, Shalene?
I will try, because I will say it is very disheartening. Our school board took their elected position very seriously, and that they're charged to oversee and the health and safety of the students in our district. When they took the oath of office, they vowed they would uphold the state code and uphold their office. And so when the governor said it's local control, again, they did their research, they did their part, they did the right thing, and now everything they've done. It feels like the legislators feel that they're inept, that they have no. They should not have made those decisions. They have been very negative about our school boards and their ability to lead, and it's been disheartening.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, because it seems to me, in your community, school boards make decisions very often, and sometimes they might be wrong, but they always have the opportunity then to go back and correct it. But most of the time, what I see is school boards spend a lot of time researching the issues and trying to get things right. So I'm kind of wondering why then you would need a statewide mandate to overrule something that a school board has done, James.
Yeah, this is probably one of the biggest frustrations I think that school leadership and school boards have. The mantra from the legislature is always local control. We hear it every single year. But the reality to that is they want local control when it's really tough decisions to make, but they certainly want to micromanage local districts. And you're seeing that this year probably worse than we've ever seen it. We've got a couple of legislators who are truly on a power trip that want to mandate to every district what they think is right and what we should be doing. And if we don't do that, they want to punish us. I think what you're seeing is the role of legislators being skewed by their own personal vendettas and their own personal beliefs. This is a representative form of government, and oftentimes these people that are elected to represent us end up going into the legislature and pushing for their own personal agenda. In particular, one of the ones we've got right now is a push from a legislator to overrule any ruling from the Idaho High School Athletic Association. And it's just, honestly, it's asinine to think that a legislative body can do a better job of this. And it's so shallow to see how this is. This is nothing more than a personal issue for this individual, because they didn't agree that they didn't get to have a full stadium of kids during his child's basketball championship. And so instead of allowing locally elected officials to manage local issues, we now have a legislative body that wants to micromanage everything we do. And you're seeing that with curriculum, you're seeing that with activities. I mean, it's been going on for years, but I think this is probably the worst year I've seen.
Shalene, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I just say kudos to James. That is the truest statement I have heard. This whole session is. We ask students to wear masks, and now we have legislation to say, well, no one in the government officials can ask anyone to wear a mask. That is probably the simplest and most effective way or efficient way for us to keep the spread of COVID down. And that's how we're staying in school. We've had very little incident rate of, student to student or teacher to teacher, and masks are a way to help mitigate the spread. And yet we have legislation for that. And I agree with James. IHSAA has been an Idaho, standard for 80 years. We have had the schools have come together. We created the IHSAA, the districts, and we have this governance and guidance by a board that we have, all agreed to. We agreed to the rules so that the games, the activities, they're available for all children, all youth, and now after 80 years and a pandemic, we are no longer able to control or govern ourselves, or to ask questions, or to review, or to research, or to be the professionals that we are, and that we have been, and we will continue to be. And it is a personal agenda item. I think I cannot imagine that the patrons or the individuals who elected this person elected him to make sure that we can have that no one can limit the amount of people attending a game during a pandemic. I just think it's crazy, and it's really inappropriate, because we have work to do for the children of Idaho, and this is taking us away from the important work that needs to be done.
Seems to me that Idaho High School Activities Association has a governing board, and there are superintendents from the different regions of the state that are represented on that board. Is that true, James?
That's correct. The board is actually very representative of the entire state. You have coaching reps on there, you have superintendent reps. I mean, it represents Idaho schools. And so when decisions are made by that board, it's made with the best interest of Idaho schools.
Right. And there are still some regulations in place. I went to a baseball game the other night, and masks were required if you weren't, at bat, or, I don't remember all the regulations, but it was part of the deal. And it seemed to be working just fine.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's part of this is again, you go back to that local control. Every community is different. Right now, Elmore County is the hot zone in the state of Idaho. And so obviously we need to have a few more restrictions in place. But there are areas of the state where maybe they don't have to have those restrictions. Right. But to dictate that we all follow, the same exact protocol during a pandemic is really inappropriate. And it's a slap in the face to our local school boards that are elected by the people of those communities to represent them and help make those decisions.
And kind of what I've seen from the outside, Shalene, is it's mixed messages. We hear, well, you control that in Caldwell, you need to make that decision. But then, no, we don't like what this has been, this organization's done, so we're going to mandate that statewide.
I agreed. I just think, like James is saying, our patrons in Caldwell, so our student athletes and their parents, they have been so supportive because they want to play. And I would say that's the importance of the IHSAA during this pandemic. They have worked together across the state, and we are diverse, and we are a large state with a lot of different opinions and thoughts, but IHSAA has worked so that we could have athletic events, and we could do so safely in a time when they have received a lot of counsel or advice saying we probably shouldn't wrestle, and yet we were able to figure out a way to have a season and working together so that our wrestlers were safe and that we could continue and we could compete. And we see that also with our CTE programs, working out how can we provide our CTE programs with the competitions or those state events and do so safely. And it's coming together, it's working together, and it's not to be, I don't want to say counter to one another or to be negative. It's amazing how in the SIC we are such different schools and yet respectful of our different communities, and that's what that's what the focus should have been on. It wasn't meant to be divisive. Okay.
Well, nice discussion about that issue. So one of the things that I think, at least I regarded as positive this year, is that the voucher bill was defeated in the Senate on a very close vote, 16-18, and then it actually came back again and lost 15-20. So it's at least dead for this session, but I think we've seen it 3 of the last 4 years at least in the legislature. And so I'm just wondering, why are public school superintendents opposed to private school vouchers? James?
Yeah, that's a great question, because just from a casual look at it, it sounds like it's not a big deal, right? But the reality of it is, especially in rural Idaho, where you don't have a lot of private schools, what ends up happening is funding is pulled from all schools to help fund those private school vouchers. And so rural communities get hit even harder. It's not that our kids are attending these private schools, it's that we're helping fund private schools in our bigger urban areas. And, the Treasure Valley has a bulk of the private schools there. And so, you look at this from my lens is from a rural school, and it doesn't benefit the community of Mountain Home in any way, but in fact, it takes away funding from the public schools in these rural communities.
Right. Well, I mean, from what I've read, 75% of the private schools are in 4 counties, and Ada and Canyon are 2 of those 4. So yeah, there's not much in rural Idaho.
Yeah, and so Don, I think that's what was very misleading with this is this idea that somehow this helps all these kids across Idaho, and it doesn't. And again, it's the rich get richer, right? Well, that's kind of a bad term in education, because nobody in Idaho education is funded how we should be anyways. But it's taking away an already scarce resource to benefit areas that typically are better funded at the local level, and really creating, again, a divide, which we know is very clear in this state between rural and urban, and just making that issue, amplifying that issue even more.
Yeah. So yes, I was superintendent for a while in the Boise district, and there are 40 private schools in Ada County, and I had not realized it until I looked at it. Shalene, you want to follow up?
Yeah, I thank you. I'm going back to the Idaho Constitution, and I feel Constitution works for them, then it's fine. It's that we are to maintain a uniform and thorough system of public, free, common schools. And this last voucher bill, which in the form of a grant, the money was going to private, and private and parochial schools would benefit from the grant, and that is not in line with the Constitution of our state. And I think it's offensive when you can put aside the 131 years of history of our Constitution that has guided and directed the citizens of Idaho and has kept us on a track of prosperity.
Yeah, but what I heard from a proponent of the voucher bill is that it's all because of choice. There needs to be more choices for parents in the state, and so adding this would provide more choice. In response to that, Shalene?
Yeah, so that's what charters are for, right? I feel like the charter movement came into being so that parents would have choice, and there are some excellent charter schools in our state with a niche market where some students are better served in that environment. I don't think that a grant or a voucher is necessary, and I think that Idaho, we have awesome choices for education. And when you look at the public schools in your neighborhood and the charter schools that are in your neighborhood, there's choice. And I personally think that the voucher is a way to undermine all the good work of public ed.
James?
Yeah, I think that notion of choice is just a really easy and kind of cheap way to push the propaganda with it. I understand in rural communities, there may not be as many choices, but there is certainly choice. Look here in Mountain Home, we have open enrollment. So our kids, elementary kids can attend any of our elementary schools. And we have a lot of parents that do that, out of choice. We have a charter school, we have online opportunities. And so this idea that there aren't choices available is kind of silly. I also look at it this way. How many choices should there really be before you've completely watered everything down? You can build 100 hamburger stands in a row next to each other, and does it really mean you get a better hamburger out of it? Or is it just that you have the choice of 100 different hamburger places? So the more prudent thing is to invest in the current choices that we have and strengthen those.
Yeah, I mean, I think I might have mentioned this the last time, Shalene, but that argument falls apart when you think about the fact that the more choices you provide in one system inevitably leads to a lack of choices in another. And so,
Exactly.
if you think about a public school system that has responded to the growth of charters by offering more choices, well, now what? You have less money, and so now you offer fewer choices. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm thinking of, James is right. You water it down, and pretty soon we, as a public school, maybe we can't offer as many CTE programs as we have in the past.
Right.
That's a choice. When we're able to provide students with that type of access or I would say curriculum, those are awesome choices. And when we lose an AP class and we can't replace the teacher because we've had to cut the budget because, again, like James said, it's all watered down. There's not more money for all the choices. Right. We only have a budget, and it has to be able to support the choices we have currently. And I agree. Let's focus on what we do have so that the hamburger stand that we offer has the best hamburger on the menu, right? James, I like that analogy.
All right, so we're going to move from hamburger stands over to an issue that really is concerning, and that is that it seems like a record number of superintendents have retired or resigned this year. And if you just look at the Southern Idaho Conference, of which all your schools are members, there are 4 or 5 that are gone. And I'm wondering, does that concern you, and why do you think it's happening this way? James?
Yeah, it definitely concerns me, and I don't think it certainly is just superintendents. I think it's education right now.
Oh, okay.
Burnout is at an all-time high. I think a lot of our communities understand that. I look at our teachers, and we've got 5.5 weeks of school to go, and we're running on fumes. And I understand this whole thing has been stressful to everybody, and school staff, we've taken a beating. There's questioning at every level, but quite honestly, except at our community level, our communities have been extremely supportive of what we're doing. Not necessarily agreeing with every decision that's made, but very supportive. But it turns right back into this issue we see with the legislature, where everything we do is questioned and everything is assumed that we're doing it wrong or for inappropriate reasons. And I think you saw that rear its head last week, when all of a sudden this whole notion of critical theory and social justice came out in the legislature and led to the defeat of the funding bill. And the irony in all of that, Don, is that what that tells me is our legislators don't read the Idaho standards if they think that's what we're teaching. And so I think it would do them a little good to educate themselves on what exactly are the standards for Idaho education.
Yeah, in fact, Shalene, there were a number of legislators involved in the rewrite of the standards this summer, weren't there?
There were. I was thinking that as James is saying, that if you'll recall, last session, they eliminated the standards, and the governor had to put in a temporary rule to keep so that we had standards. So that during this last year, these legislators that were sitting on the rewrite of those standards could go to work. And so I am confused. I'm like James. What do they think we're teaching? We're teaching standards they've approved. And when a current event comes up in a class, are we not supposed to talk about current events? We do live in the United States of America. We're not isolated from the rest of this country. And things do happen, and our youth have questions. And it doesn't mean that we're teaching social justice as they've purported, but that we are addressing those questions that are part of our history and are part of our country.
Interesting. So I think that today or early next week, the PDG grant, the preschool grant, is going to be considered by the House. I think it barely passed the Senate last week. And I'm just wondering, that's a $6 million federal grant over 3 years, so $18 million to investigate preschool and early childhood programs to see if there are some that we ought to be really taking a harder look at. And yet I've heard the same thing with regard to that grant. In fact, it got defeated in the House the first time because of that. Shalene, what's your thought on that?
I think it's ludicrous that this has even gone to this point. This, I put out there, it's been put out by Idaho Ed News and other news agencies, that this grant was approved by the Trump administration. So this is a Republican-backed grant, if that's what it's, if we need to go political on it. But it's about the children of Idaho and helping our young learners be ready and prepared and to make good choices and decisions as they enter school. And it's supporting our communities and our local daycares or local preschools or the preschools that are within our school walls. And I am just dumbfounded by the misinformation, and it almost comes off as I don't know, the sky is falling when we hear that we're going to be indoctrinating 3 and 4-year-olds. Well, if any one of those legislators has visited a preschool, they will see that what we teach is how to to play and get along with each other. What it is to work on your fine motor skills, your gross motor skills. I'm just.
What does that mean? Fine motor and gross motor. Can you talk a little bit?
So that they are able to hold a pencil, that they can work with clay, that they can throw a ball, that they're developing physically and mentally, and really learning to get along and how to share, and what it means to. I'll say this in my mind: your children are learning to discipline themselves. How to handle when things don't go their way, how they work together to make a better community. So it's not indoctrination. It's called caring and nurturing and supporting children as they grow and develop.
One of the other pieces of this whole thing has been preparation for reading. And I know that for the two of you, that has a special significance in that, when I was working in Boise, we have several elementary schools that have 90% of their kids prepared on the IRI in the fall of kindergarten. So they're ready to read when they get there. And yet I know that the schools, some of the elementary schools in both your districts are less than 20%. So kids are arriving at school unprepared. And we know that a quality pre-K, for example, can increase that percentage dramatically. So they're on much more of a level playing field when they get there. James?
Yeah, that I think is the whole issue with early childhood education. How we turned this into a political issue is baffling. You look at the benefit of a pre-K program to have kids school ready to come into kindergarten. The irony in this is they don't want to fund, the legislature, has shown resistance to fund early childhood education, but they'll certainly beat us over the head with a stick when we show students not being prepared, in first grade, second grade, third grade. And the correlation is so clear that the earlier you intervene with these kids that aren't prepared, the better the outcomes are. The reality of it is, if you don't have a kid at grade level by third grade, the chances of them ever reaching grade level throughout their academic career goes down significantly every single year. And so to not invest in pre-K and full-time kindergarten is really, it's the hypocrisy of it, that they want these outcomes that they can measure, but they don't want to invest in the support that's needed to achieve those outcomes.
And Shalene, I remember that in Caldwell, every one of the elementary schools is below 20% prepared when kids arrive in kindergarten.
Well, and Don, that's why so our goal is that we graduate, students that are literate, and they are going to be they'll contribute to our communities and help our state be the great state that it can be, and that it can become. Well, we know in order to graduate that student, we need to get them in early. We need to be able to work with their parents early. So when you have children coming to kindergarten and they do not know their alphabet, maybe they only know 2 or 3 letters, then there's a concern. And how do we support families best? Well, and our thoughts were our best way to support them is through a preschool outreach and working with our community partners, because as we know how important literacy skills are, and if you're coming into kindergarten without those literacy skills, it's like James said, it's going to be very difficult to be on track at third grade if you are learning your alphabet in first grade. If that's when you're mastering that, then that's an issue. But we can work with parents if we can, if there was the support, which we believe in Caldwell, we have that support. But the earlier we start, the better outcomes we'll have when it comes to graduation and getting students literate and being on track to be the citizens of Idaho of the future.
Well, I'm hesitant to say this, but it appears to me that, we're really not talking about social justice. We're talking about social skills and academic skills. And that's what we'd like kids to have better when they arrive in kindergarten. James?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with it. But again, it goes back to that. We've turned everything political.
Yeah.
And we can't even see the the good things that are there that are trying to be provided for kids without making it some kind of this political angle, which is just unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm going to use a personal example here. I was a reading specialist in the Boise district, and I know that when you can catch kids in kindergarten or before or in first grade, you can really make a difference. And I know of several kids that I worked with that ended up being at grade level or above at the end of first grade, and then they just took off because they had those reading skills. But they have to have that basis. They have to have those initial skills coming in, and anyway, early childhood, that's what they're for, really.
And John, I just, the early childhood, that pre-K, pre-K3, the confidence that the children gain, I think that speaks volumes, because the more confident learner they are, the better they will do as they move through the more abstract learning that takes place when they're tasked with a geometry problem in 8th grade,
Mm-hmm.
and they have had the confidence all along the way that they can do it, then they will have the perseverance to stay and work through that problem and become the problem solvers that we all hope they will be. I think also pre-K, it's a great opportunity to talk about the importance of attendance. And when we can build good attendance habits at an early age, then those good attendance habits pay off as they go through their learning experience.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Can you talk about how your teachers are doing? I know there have been some teachers who've gone, a lot of teachers have gone the extra mile for kids during the pandemic. Can you just talk generally? And then if you have a couple examples, that'd be really helpful. James?
Yeah, I think without our teachers, this whole year doesn't happen. And, the anxiety at the beginning of the year to this point has been, it's been just a struggle. And, we can see the finish line, though. Like you said, we're 5.5 weeks from being there. And I think that the sense of accomplishment is so tremendous. And, for me, I'm just thankful for them. I have kids in our school district, and those teachers have not missed a beat with the support and care they're giving those kids. And with that said, it goes back to that. We anticipate losing staff, and staff that are probably going to get out of education because of this year. And it's not because they don't enjoy their job. It's not because they don't enjoy the kids. It's that continual negativity at the state level on the job that we do. So, for us, there's been a lot of shining stars, and I look at this, and one of the big things to me is to watch how we've been able to do interventions, even during when we were in a hybrid mode. You think there was this idea, school's closed, right? No, school wasn't closed. We were bringing kids in for interventions on virtual days because we know those kids needed that additional help and support. And so for a lot of kids, boy, they got some great one-on-one or very small group instruction. And that was something that our staff created. That wasn't anything that we directed. That was our staff knowing the needs of those kids and what needed to be done. And I think that is probably the most critical thing, is let our teachers teach. Let them be the experts that they are. That's what they do, and they do it every single day.
Shalene?
Yeah, I was well said, James. I agree with James. I've had some, parents will email and just express their appreciation for the teacher who has contacted them every week or maybe 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure their child's on track. We have teachers and administrators who have made several home visits because a student they weren't checking in, or there was a concern that maybe things weren't quite right, and the above and beyond. I will say this: our parent-teacher conferences will not ever look the same, and we I think it's more, you'll see a more parent-teacher outreach, that it's all along the way. We've set a new expectation of what it means to communicate with parents. It's not the sit down in the gym and people come one night or two nights in a semester or time frame and meet with the teacher, but it is an outreach and the availability and the concern for students. So I agree with James. I mean, there is concern. We are worried. As we've said in the past, there is a teacher shortage. The education pool, or those choosing to go into education, is becoming more limited. That people are not making that choice, and it's a great career. It's a great way to influence the future of our state through our youth. But as teachers decide to retire this year, when they may have worked another year or two, but they're making the choice to go now, or those who have made choices to they can work somewhere else. Like we have quality people who've decided that I can probably move, have a good living and do this instead because of the stress and the negativity. I mean, the negativity towards educators has been ongoing for some time, in my opinion. But this year it's been really difficult to listen to our legislators demean the professionals that are caring for our youth.
And yet, you talked about the silver lining of the fact that you won't ever do conferences the same.
Right.
And I'm assuming, James, that there's some other things that have come out of this that will probably be permanent changes in your district.
Absolutely. I think this was the great push towards utilizing more technology in education, and that's positive. You look at, we've got Chromebooks in the hands of kindergartners, and there's that fear of they're not going to be able to do this. Well, you come watch a kindergarten class with Chromebook and you will be amazed. And that's the way of the future right now. And so I feel like one of the silver linings with this is it's pushed education faster into utilizing technology than we would have got without the pandemic. And so some of those things are just going to stick long term, and they should. That's the world our kids are growing up in. That's the world we need to help them navigate and learn those skills with how to navigate that. And so, I think in anything, there's always a positive. We displayed incredible resilience. Our staff was resilient, and I think our staff honestly probably collaborated more together this year than any other year. And I think those are things that will stick in the long term.
Thank you for that, James. So just in closing, we've just got a couple minutes left. It seems like it went by so fast. Are you going to get some time for yourselves during the summer, some downtime? Have you got some plans? James, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you bet. One of the things I'm looking forward to, honestly, is visiting family. Haven't been able to see them for a while.
Right.
And, then we'll get out, and our family loves to camp and fish. And so we'll do some of that. But strangely, one of the things I'm really excited about is planning for next school year. It's a continuous cycle. You finish the year and you're already planning. And so I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for what's next.
Shalene?
Yes, thanks. I have to agree with James. We're excited about the opportunity we will have, that we anticipate having with our summer bridge learning in every school. So you're like, I was thinking, what will I be doing? Well, I can tell you June will be very much, I want to watch and see and just go see these summer bridge programs. Every school in our district has plans, and bringing back students for opportunities to learn, explore, and build those relationships and reconnect. They'll set up the classes or the courses based on information that we're gleaning now at the some of our assessment data, and say anyway, just preparing to help kids make a little bit of a bridge to the next grade. and also just have some good project-based learning that we have not had to have, we would have not been able to afford before.
Right. Well, our time is up. Thanks you guys so much for spending another 45 minutes with our viewers talking about the state of education and how it looks going forward. I've been fascinated by your remarks, and I hope a lot of people have a chance to listen, view, and see what's happening in Idaho schools. Thank you so much. Take care, you guys.
Yes, thank you.